Hello, hello, hello. It is I, David Stewart, your friendly neighborhood thought criminal. It's time for another non-argument. This one I call the narrative. And it's actually not a non-argument or a fallacy so much as it is a sophist approach or a sophist device, maybe. And what the narrative basically is when somebody tells you a story about yourself in an attempt to undermine your credibility or to really to put you on the defensive or shift your focus away from whatever point you're trying to make or whatever argument you're making. And I've technically covered some of this ground already in the past, like with the false motivation fallacy. You are only doing this because you hate women. But to me, the narrative is something a little bit bigger. Like the little fallacy of like you hate women is just like a brushstroke in the great painting of the narrative. The narrative is there to do a whole bunch of different things, and there may be a bunch of things in there. There may be non sequiturs, there may be derailment, it may be ad hominems, it may be false motivation, it may be a million different things put into a story that's designed to distract and befuddle you. Now, the reason that I think that this particular device is very effective is because of where it's used. And it's used a lot in any sort of context where all the relevant parties and witnesses don't necessarily have a great knowledge of each other's background. And so that means mostly on the internet, right? Because on the internet, we don't know each other as well as like your friend or your brother is going to know you and knows what contributes to your life's perspective and to your personality and to your opinions. So that leaves a big opportunity for people to tell little stories about you that are designed to, basically they all do the same thing. And all of these things, same thing with ad hominems, what they do is they attempt to shift the locus of discussion away from the argument or the matter at hand and over to some other topic that isn't relevant. And you have to remember with a debate, you're not just talking to another person. You're talking to another person for witnesses. That's the point of a debate. And it works the same way on anything. Like on YouTube comments, there's people who read the conversation and see everything that's going on. So because it's like this, if you know that the witnesses also don't have a big background knowledge of that person, you can spin a yarn. You can tell a narrative to the witnesses about that. Now it's effective for that reason because the witnesses don't know the person, and that means you can tell them a story and they're likely to remember it, especially if you tell it as a good story. But also because we tend to get pretty defensive about ourselves, and especially our backgrounds and things that contribute to us being us. We want to tell our story. We don't want to let other people tell our story. So the way that a narrative might play out is somebody would write a story about you not being a credible person to engage in the debate because of some background you have. Like, you're not fit to talk about entrance to the army or the pluses and minuses of joining the military because you weren't in the military. And they tell this kind of story. It's like, you civilians are all the same. You do this and that. You go to Starbucks and you drink coffee and you serve coffee to other idiots with like big plugs in their ears. And then you realize the person that you're saying that to is actually a veteran, right? But he hasn't made his background, there. But he says, actually, I was in the army for 8 years. Now that as soon as he starts responding to that, the sophist device has worked because it's shifted the locus of discussion away from the point. And so I think that's the big way that they're effective. Now, that's not, I think, the only reason that people use them, though, especially on the internet. I think people use them because we're always looking to contextualize everything into a story. That's why if you give two sets of facts to two different writers, they can write two different articles about the same set of facts, causing readers to draw two radically different conclusions about them. And I've actually done this exercise with my students. I've told them two different stories about the same guy going to buy a candy bar. And in one, he's like a depressed fat guy. And the other one, he's like an ecstatic child. It just depends on how you contextualize the facts. And maybe I'll do that as another video, just as like a little example of how the narrative can affect the way that we take facts and remember them, because we don't remember facts, we remember stories. So anyway, what will happen is that you'll see somebody say something that you don't like. Let's imagine that you're going to be the sophist in this little scenario. You see somebody say something that you don't like and it upsets you. And you also don't understand why that person would think that. So you write a story that then puts what they said into a little box and a context that makes it safe to handle. Because if it puts it into a box and a context that makes it safe to handle, that means you've negated somehow the power of that idea to a certain extent. And then you no longer have to interact with that being a possible reality, whatever claim that person happened to make. You say, well, he's just saying that because, whatever the narrative happens to be. He's just saying that because, he never got laid. He's some depressed virgin living in his mom's basement. I get comments on like gaming videos that it's like, oh, some guy in his mom's basement. It's like, I'm not in my mom's basement. It's their story because they didn't like something about me. So they just put it in a little box where they don't have to interact with any kind of reality that I might be presenting them with. And so that makes it safe to handle, and that resolves a lot of the inner cognitive dissonance. Because if somebody is saying something that is untruthful for a reason other than they believe it's truthful and they have a good reason to believe it's truthful, then that means we don't have to interact with the possible truth of whatever that statement is. It makes it really safe to handle. So I think people do this on their own, kind of subconsciously in some senses, to avoid having to interact with reality, or to just try to frame and put facts in a context so that their brain can just understand it better. I think it's a natural human thing. And to be honest, like, I do it too. I do it mostly to troll people, and so I do it as a sophist. I'll admit to that. When people come by and they like fling a bunch of insults at me and say that they're gonna like track me down and kill me because I didn't like Star Wars, I just say, well, look, another butthurt Star Wars fanboy. Now, he may not be a Star Wars fanboy at all. I'm just writing a little narrative about him. But it's just something there to upset a troll to me. And that's just kind of how I do it. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I'm above all these little particular devices, or that I'm immune to cognitive dissonance or something like that. But I can think of like so many, like, numerous examples of it. It's hard to think of like every single one. But the chances are, if you start contextualizing something that you don't know about somebody and creating a story, that you're engaging in it. And if you see somebody telling a story, like maybe you think that because your past is like this, then it's like, well, you're kind of writing a narrative, and you need to not do that and just like sort of interact with whatever that the claim happened to be. Like one thing that I think of, I'll give you a little anecdote about it. I was watching some classical music video, I think of a recording of the Firebird Suite a long time ago, and the conductor just looked completely retarded. He just looked so stupid. It was the worst conducting I've ever seen in my life. And if you guys know me, I actually know how to conduct. I conduct on a daily basis. Now, I'm giving you this information because that will make the narrative writing later that people did all the more funny. And yes, believe it or not, I have taught music for a long time. I taught it at the college level. I actually do know a thing or two about conducting, and I don't think conducting is like super, super cool. I think you're mostly a glorified metronome, and you organize the group, and people that put conductors on pedestals, I'm like, I'm not about that. He's just a dude. He's just a dude who keeps the tempo moving along. Not that isn't pointless, but anyway, I made this statement that this video is proof that conducting is irrelevant to an ensemble of this caliber, because it was like the Vienna Philharmonic. It was a really, really good orchestra, and the conductor looked like a total loon. He wasn't even keeping time. I don't know what he was doing. He wasn't using any conducting techniques that were developed over the last 300 or 400 years. We'll just put it that way. And then immediately, I start getting spammed with like all kinds of narratives about me. And every so often I'll get one pop up on Google Plus that I just find really funny. That it's like, you really need to go take conducting classes. It's like, I probably took more than that person. It's like, you really need to, it's like, shut off your sequencer and go listen to some real music. It's like, if you guys know me, this is a comment on somebody watching a classical music video, right? So the whole idea is kind of a little dumb, but the narrative's gone from there, that like I'm some depressed like college dropout, that I'm only angry that someone else had this kind of success as a conductor, or that I failed my conducting exams or something like that. There's always a million little stories, and I don't respond to them. I just write in. I'm like, you guys are telling a bunch of little stories and just ignoring what I had to say. because you know that I'm right, that the conductor really didn't matter to this orchestra's performance, and you know it didn't matter because he was completely bonkers and he would have failed any beginning conducting class. And so it was a really, really funny little example and anecdote that I just remember really, really clearly. And if you guys know me in the channel, you'll understand it even more clearly when somebody's trying to write stories about how I need to go study music or something like that. Okay. But anyway, I guess that's about all I have to say about it. It's something that, we probably want to avoid doing unless we're trying to go like full bore sophist. And it's something that my advice for responding to it is you just point it out. You just say, you're writing a story about me that has nothing to do with reality. How about you respond to my points? Right. And once you sort of expose that it's like you're writing a story about me and you don't know me, then it's kind of obvious what's going on there, because the tendency is to sort of get defensive and respond and say, oh, hey, I want to tell you my story. But as soon as you've done that, then the sophist device has worked. You've moved the locus of the conversation away from the topic at hand, away from the conversation at hand, and off to something else that's just not relevant. So you guys have a great day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can visit my websites, dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com. Check out my book links down below. Muramasa Blood Drinker. It is available. I'm very, very happy if you read it and leave me a review, as is Prophet of the God Seed. And you guys have a great, great day.